Retweets. Retweets, please. Please retweet. Okay. Let's get this fired up here. I'm excited. I hope this OBS lasts. All right, retweet. All right. You're listening to episode 195 of PHP Ugly. I'm your host, Eric, and with me, John.
Hello, hello.
And Tom.
Hello, hello.
I said John right in the middle of a drink, and then I remembered. Oh wait, I'm not waiting for him to respond anywhere. Then I don't know. I fumbled that one.
No, you did fine.
How are we all doing?
Well, you were saying before the show, it's been a week. Because, man, it's been a week.
Oh, man, it's been a week.
It's been a shitty week.
Just been one thing after another for me personally. Like I was telling Thomas before the show started, John, I had to get out of the house this morning. I couldn't even stand being in front of the computer. I just needed to get out. I needed to see grass. I needed to breathe air. I just had to get away from the desk it was just an hour or two, but man, did I need it.
Had a guy try to fight me on Saturday.
Oh, really? He only tried to fight you?
Only tried to.
What brought that up? Well, first thing, why are you around strangers who want to fight you? I mean,
it was a.
What are you guys doing in that state?
It was a small gathering of friends, and a Tinder date.
I hope it wasn't your Tinder date.
It was not my Tinder date.
Okay, good. That's a good start.
Yeah, but we were having a lengthy discussion about the political topics of the day, and the words "white privilege" made him incredibly angry.
Oh, yes. Difficult conversation.
Yes.
Yes,
well,
for sure.
Not really. I mean, it's an easy conversation. For me, I have
that's true.
I have no problem explaining it to people. I'm white and have white privilege, and it's easy for me to just go, yeah, here's like the most basic example. But he was not on board.
I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what his deal was, but he was escorted out of the house.
I'm sorry. What didn't you get, John?
I just don't get why people take such offense to when you tell them when you tell a white person they have white privilege, they take offense to it, like you're calling them racist.
So what it came down to was he obviously didn't understand the term because he was telling me that he grew up in a poor neighborhood and had it hard his whole life, and he was screaming that at me as he was escorted out of the house, and I was trying to reply back, that's irrelevant to the statement, but he wasn't hearing it.
All right, we're not here to talk about politics, although I have a feeling we can't help but wiggle down that path.
Yeah.
But let's see if we can't start off a little bit more positive. I got a lot of background noise from one of you two.
I'm gonna guess me for some reason.
Yes. Are you in a printing plant? Running out newspapers?
Yeah, as usual.
Doing his greeting cards. Can you mute your mic for a second? Let me see if it's you. Yep, definitely you. Yeah. Okay, you can unmute. I mean, we'll just deal with it. I'll take it out in post.
You just gave him a reason to not do this episode. That's a horrible thing to do.
Okay, so we started the show with white privilege. Let's talk about the topic of master branch in GitHub's announcement this week. Do we want to go down that path?
Yeah, I guess. I don't think there's a lot to. Why are you getting louder?
John, you are getting way worse. That's perfect. Just keep it like that for the show. I don't know what's going on over there. I assume it's his beer keg. His little kegerator or something. No, not the kegerator. You don't hear any background noise.
Laptop.
Oh, really? Your laptop?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm trying to shut.
chugging
I'm trying to
along.
shut down everything I can.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, let's talk about GitHub has plans on replacing the default master branch with another naming convention. Do we have any opinions of this, or do we care?
Uh,
I don't see any issue with changing it. What's the harm with if you can make one person feel more inclusive or included? What's wrong with changing a convention that has been set by that doesn't really mean anything?
yeah, I think
There's-
this is far less of an issue than some people are making it out to be, and I think the people who are making it out to be a giant issue are just full of themselves and need to shut up and listen more.
So you feel okay? So I will play devil's advocate here. I don't care as long as there's a standard and there's an industry standard. I don't particularly care. I remember when there was a push to rename the master slave configuration of disk,
Yeah,
and that made sense to me. This doesn't make that much sense to me. I think it's a little bit of a reach. I mean, words have contextual meaning, and the content of how they're being used is meaningful. I never, ever associated master branch with any racial language. It never even occurred to me. Same way I don't think of master bedroom as a racially
right.
motivated term or anything else. Master does have a meaning beyond the racial meaning. So contextually, I did not see master branch as a problem, but again, it's not a hill I'm willing to die on. I feel it's a little bit of a reach from GitHub to say, hey, look, we want to do our part, but contextually, that was a stretch. It's like, I'm not going to applaud you for doing it. If you want to do it, fine, we'll do it. We'll come up with another name if it makes, if it's what people want to do. I don't really have that big of an opinion about it, but really, don't look for a pat on the back for this one because I don't really see it that way.
That's where we disagree.
I don't know. I
You disagree?
As primary and replicas.
Well, again, that was master slave scenario, so that has a direct context to slavery. But master branch, master bedroom, master degree, master is used in a lot of different places where it doesn't have racial a racial meaning behind it. I felt master branch was one of those contexts. So again, I'm not worried about changing it. I think GitHub was looking for more of a yay, thanks for doing this sort of response, and they got that, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, you say you felt it was kind of in that context. Why would you have ever thought that?
Not necessarily that it's in that context. It's more of if I would. Oh,
I totally lost you there, John. I didn't hear a word you just said.
I can't hear anything.
we've just lost him completely.
John's crashing. He's slowly going down, man.
I think it doesn't.
Go ahead, Thomas.
I think it doesn't really matter. The thing that you have to be aware of are false advocates. And this is an issue right now where the opposing group is trying to say that they represent BLM or minority interests, when in reality they're making absurdist claims and comments in order to incite people being upset. And if there are people, I mean, now if you get into the internals group in PHP right now, there is a lot of conversation about this kind of stuff going on, about who is it we're representing, and are they actually complaining? Do they actually have a problem with what's being used? And if they are, then they should speak up, and then we'll address it when they speak up. But if not, then it's a non-issue.
Mm-hmm.
There are flaws in that thought process as well. If you have terminology in your environment that discourages people of color from involving themselves, then you can't ask them to speak up because you're already inherently excluding them in some way. So it's a common sense balancing act. And you have to weigh how much it actually matters and how much it actually affects problems, creates problems. You could already dynamically name your trunk branch anything you wanted to. GitHub is just changing the default value. So it's not going to affect old projects, and it'll only affect new projects if they decide to stick with what the default is set to. So it has literally no unintended consequences. And master is, among the Git community, considered not the best term anyways, because trunk far better describes the intention of that branch.
That was the old CVS terminology, wasn't it? Trunk?
Yeah. So.
But now, what's interesting though is when you do a git init, that's what creates the master on your local machine, isn't it?
Possibly. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, it's just a convention. It's what they started out with in Git. But it really doesn't mean anything.
Right. So the only point being that if you're using GitHub and it defaults to another name, you have to know to take care of that locally. And I assume they'll put instructions for that for newbies. Obviously I'm not worried about it. I like to make people think I know what I'm doing. John, you seem like you had more input before we lost you, though. I wanted to give you a chance.
No, all I was saying was that if you can make one person feel more included in your organization, there's no reason not to do that.
Interesting. Okay.
Quite simply. It's, again, master means nothing in Git. It's just a convention that was set by the creator. I personally prefer production. I know trunk was an or CVS convention, but again, it was a convention. That's what we push to production. So why not have a production branch, a develop branch, a staging branch, and that's what you use.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the biggest thing I've seen is the people who are adamantly against it. Where
I don't know if I've seen any of those arguments. Why would somebody be adamantly against it? I mean, what's there to be against?
Have you seen people on Facebook?
Yeah, there are valid concerns.
No, I literally haven't, and I'm proud of that fact.
Okay, there are valid concerns for changing conventions that people are accustomed to, but it's the adamantness that I think is funny, because I just look at that person and go, "Oh, now I know who you are."
Well, it's also the people that are so against any sort of. There are be politically correct.
All we caught was the politically correct part at the end.
Yeah, you're having a rough go at it today, John.
So this argument you.
It's usually me. I'm usually the one that struggles, so this feels good. It feels good not being me. Yeah, I think I get the gist of what you were saying, or where you're going with that, John. Yeah, the thing is conventions are conventions. I mean, when you start a job at a new company, chances are they're going to have a convention, and you learn to adapt to that convention. But whatever it is,
yeah.
Why they have it is, who is none of your business. Well, I mean, it might be something you can discuss, but it's not really. You don't want to go to a new job and start saying, "Well, I don't like these conventions. Let's change all this around," because people may not like you. So I've heard. I don't know. I'm not speaking from experience. But All right, we've already talked about that too much. I didn't know if it was a big topic or not. I didn't really see the need for it, but again, didn't really care that it was happening. But I did see a lot of conversation about it, and so I'm like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. So, for the record, although John, I never did see you send out that notice, but for the record, we're going to be changing our branches as we get to them and start updating, CI tools and things like that internally here at DiegoDev. But
Yeah.
yeah, yes, main was one of the ones I heard tossed around a lot as well. Somebody mentioned main, prod, production, trunk, and there's plenty out there. I think that's going to be the thing, and until Git. If Git actually changes it at the command line, that would probably become the convention because everybody's too lazy to change it. But until that happens, I'm not so sure there is going to be a convention. I mean, just everybody's just going to do whatever's comfortable. I agree with John. We've been doing dev, test, stage. And why not prod? Why not product? I'd probably go prod just because it's shorter. We do dev. I'd probably do prod, but it's like, yeah, why wouldn't you do that? It becomes very clear, but I don't know. I'm not worried about it. All right. Also, John, it seems like it's your noise gate. Oh, so somebody in chat is giving you some information there, John.
Yeah, I closed chat down. For some reason, my switching input guys go to crap every couple of minutes. It's just a nightmare right now. I'll see in Skype that it goes from using my Yeti to something else. It's just crazy.
And I see you switched headphones. I told you I was having that problem with my
No,
headphones.
this was my fault. They were low on battery earlier, and I forgot to charge them. My fault.
All right. No worries. All right.
So we started talking about how hellish a week this has been, and I had a double dose of just sort of hellish issues. The first one, fortunately, worked itself out okay. Deploy HQ went down in the middle of a production deployment.
Well, what are the odds of that happening? Jeez.
I don't know, but I got no response whatsoever about if the push succeeded or if it failed. I don't know which tools executed or didn't execute. It just thought that the deployment was still running when it came back up an hour later. So that was interesting.
Yeah, that it. So did it actually screw something up? Because I know with our deployment tools, like it doesn't actually switch over until it has a successful, hey, yes, this is deployed, I've confirmed it, I'm switching over to this deployment.
It didn't appear to actually break anything. It looks like the push was successful. Perfect. It just didn't communicate back to the reporting server. So,
yeah.
I don't know. It was...
We had a fun problem this week as well. The client... We jinxed ourselves, actually. We were just talking last week about how this one client was happy with their product. And we go to deploy it on a server, and they're seeing issues. It's like these little weird little glitches here and there. And it was one in particular that really, like, the developers were like, that doesn't make sense. I should be catching this in dev. There's no way this should be working in my development environment and breaking on the server. And it turned out it was a difference between them testing, and it wasn't their fault. It was the Docker configuration for that project was set to 7.2, and the server was set at 7.3. And apparently, between those two versions, 7.3, if you don't define a variable that you're passing, it throws an error. Where in 7.2 it didn't. And it was like, are you kidding me? Like, this one little edge case is what we have in our code that this actually caught.
It was some function call. 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 I forget
I'm trying to
what it
remember.
was,
Yeah,
but
I think no, no, it wasn't a function call. Yeah, well, it was a function call. He was actually they were running compact, which is a Laravel command, and passing the
no, it's
variables
not
so that the
Laravel.
view had access
That's
to.
PHP.
Compact is PHP.
Mhm.
Really, I never knew that. I could be using compact in my straight PHP code.
Uh-huh.
Well, goddamn! Today I learned this. I thought that was a Laravel convention. That's fantastic. Oh, anyways, they were using. Well, that makes sense because that's why that's what broke, right? So they weren't defining one of the variables that they were sending to compact, which I guess wasn't an issue in 3.2, but in 7.2, but in 7.3 it chirped and broke, and of course the client saw that. They were like, hey, yeah. I know you have a demo. Just want to make sure we get the application to you a couple days early so you can play with it. Let us know if you have any questions. Yeah, I got a question. Why is this broken? I'm like, what? Unfortunately, that wasn't the only problem he saw. He found another bug, but we got them both fixed.
Yeah, I was
So-
beside myself when I saw him email us saying that he ran into a problem right away.
Oh man. And so were the developers. The developers had no clue as to why they weren't seeing the problem. And then one of them figured out, oh, hey, look in the release notes in 7.3. This is something that they changed or fixed. I guess it was actually a fix. So it wasn't actually a backwards breaking change because it was actually a fix to a bug, but it just made the issue more obvious. So it's been a rough week, but we got through it. I still haven't heard from the client if his demos went well. I'm really hoping they went well.
Yeah.
I had a fun bug show up.
What was that?
We have a search field in our site that we're passing through as an argument to the route, not as a get or a post var.
Okay.
Well, it turns out that Laravel interprets the URL string. It does URL decode on it before it runs it against the routes tables.
Mm-hmm.
So if I smartly URL encode a slash, then it decodes the slash and it 404s because it can't find a route because there's two slashes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I saw you post that bug report
Mhm.
to.
But this is that URL encoded in a query parameter or actually in the URL itself?
in the URL itself. So
this is something
I'm confused on why you would
at
have
least
that there.
they're aware of.
Or your route is something like an ID that has a slash in it.
it's a search field. So they can insert slashes, but if they insert slashes, I URL encode them so that the search passes through successfully because this passes to a back-end API. So I do all this sanitization. I get rid of emojis and foreign characters, and then I URL encode stuff, and then I pass it to the back-end API, which is also Laravel, and the back-end API says, I can't find that route. There's too many slashes. And
It's funny. This bug was reported back in 2014.
yes, and Taylor closed it saying, just don't use slashes in the URLs. Use something else.
But what I was gonna say, so it seems like an edge case that you're having it now, but yeah, you see conversations about it in 2015, 2017, 2018, as late as December 2019, which it looks like there's a person in here who's written a package to help help as a workaround for this bug because Taylor won't fix it in core.
No, because it's according to Taylor. This is as intended, which is fucking bizarre. It is absolutely bizarre that I would URL encode something and then it would be decoded before it hits the routes. And it's just...
Yeah, you're right. That shouldn't be. That's the
right.
Yeah, I was just thinking. It's like, yeah, why would you do that? I mean, that wouldn't even be a security feature.
Right. It's a huge problem. And I noticed this because my site gets attacked, I'd say 20 times a day with like SQL injection attempts and stuff like that. Like I see the stuff showing up in Bugsnag, and this particular error threw a 404 on the API, and Guzzle didn't know how to interpret the 404, so it threw a 500 error. So, like, it's a bug. It's a real actual bug, and the response was, "Don't use slashes in your URL." I mean, that blows. Don't use slashes in your URL. I've seen Laravel's like official websites. There are slashes in the URLs, right? He's not using a hyphen for everything.
No, he's not. That's true. Well, yeah,
No, his
I mean,
point
I
was,
don't know.
was with whatever data you're passing in, don't URL encode a slash. You can still use slashes in your URL, obviously, but don't. He's dictating what your data can be, which is asinine. That's
Right.
so.
It's totally asinine, totally the wrong answer, and I mean there's like 5 tickets that reference this main ticket where he just was like, yeah, your use case is an edge case, don't do that, and closed the ticket. Like dude, no, you've got to cover edge cases. You're a framework. Like, and yeah, this is still how it's done. Even up to, I think we're up to 7.17 today. But
Just do what I do and stay back on like 5.1.
this goes back to 5.1. This goes back 5 years. 6 years.
All right, man. I'll tell you, fix it and submit a pull request.
That can be closed.
That can be that. No plans to merge. That's his big saying on pull requests that get open.
And
no plans to merge.
imagine trying to debug this issue too, because I've got what I consider to be perfectly valid data in the URL, and it pops back with a 404. Like, I just so annoying.
So we talked about facial recognition last week, and that last week tonight with John Oliver, they covered the facial recognition topic, probably because it was in the news because we talked about it.
No, it's because we talked about it.
They listened to the show.
Yeah.
No, yeah, they listened to the show. I'm sure that's what happened. John, love your show, man. But I don't know. We kind of discussed that we brushed over some of the aspects of facial recognition. Do we want to revisit any of that, or just tell everybody to watch John Oliver's show? Because I thought he did a pretty good job with it. Although he doesn't propose solutions like we do.
No, I think we covered it well. The one point was he was
Thomas says, "Yeah, Thomas, you're the one that told me to put it back on the Trello board."
he did agree with Thomas and I that
that was all I wanted him.
It needs more regulation or be banned completely.
I was saying Thomas doesn't think it needs more regulation. Thomas wants it banned.
I want it banned by government use, and I want it extremely restricted in commercial use. Because there are absolutely commercial use cases for facial recognition. The auto friends tagging stuff on Facebook, whether or not you like it, works well.
What? That's what you want. That's what you want it used for?
No, but there's no reason to restrict them
We
doing
could find
that.
missing and exploited children, and you want it to auto find your friends to tag on Facebook.
I assure you, the technology we're using to find missing and exploited children is far more advanced than this.
I don't know if I agree with you because he used that as one of the examples in his show, but I don't know. Maybe you're right.
But
Okay, well, it sounds like we're still not gonna reach an agreement on this. I definitely don't think it should be banned. Regulations for sure. Oversight a must. Global oversight to some level. I tell you, after watching the show, I got completely paranoid about private use or commercial use of facial recognition. I think that needs to really be regulated hard.
well, wait till you find out
by
about
that
Tim
one guy
Hortons.
there's that one guy who's like selling it to other governments and won't say that he won't necessarily sell to foreign adversaries.
Yep, yep. The big, and if you didn't watch the show, I do recommend you go watch it. But they were talking about governments and potentially our own government using facial recognition to identify protesters and then going and arresting those protesters, which is a extreme overreach of that technology. Now, it's speculated that happened here in the U.S., but it's known to happen in China and some other countries.
I think it's more than speculated. It was
I don't
confirmed
know.
that ICE was flying Predator drones over the protests.
Okay, but that's one thing, but that I don't know. I don't know if I've heard that it's been confirmed that they use facial recognition to go arrest protesters.
Well, no, they're sort of haphazard about arresting protesters.
So it's that sort of use case that has to have some super strenuous oversight on it in whether talk about the legalities and I don't know, man. That was a scary one, and then some of the commercial use, the one where the guy in the restaurant takes a little side picture of a woman sitting next to him, and then all of a sudden he's able to the facial recognition is able to identify her and figure out all her social media accounts, and he was able to do a little cyber stalking.
Yep.
That freaked me out. I mean, that was like that's the sort of thing that shouldn't be allowed. But yeah.
On a similar note, Tim Hortons, a journalist in Canada, decided he was going to look at the data that the Tim Hortons app had on him, and discovered that it knew where he worked, where he lived, where he went on vacation, and how long he was on vacation, and everything you could possibly know about a person through tracking their location data.
Do you know what Tim Horton is?
Yeah, it's a coffee chain like Starbucks up in Canada.
Right, yeah.
Now this
Yeah,
is this is interesting to me because he made a PIP EDA request, which is a Canadian request for information, and it brings up the question of location tracking apps. Like, why does every app want your location right now? And it's very monetizable data. So I was talking to my friend about this, and we were talking about how Apple handles this. A background app on an iPhone consistently asks you if you want to allow location tracking. So if you allow it, and the app is in the background still running, it will say after a few days, hey, do you want Tim Hortons to have your location information?
Well, I know my Android phone not only does that, but like it even does it where in my notifications it'll keep it up in the notifications, which drives me absolutely bonkers. It's like, hey, here's an example. See if I can get that on the phone. Right there. No, it's letting me know the if this then that app is tracking my location in the background because I have IFTTT jobs that kick off depending on where I'm at. So it continues, and I know it's running back there. I gave it permission, but this notification now is in my notification bar, and it will not let me dismiss it.
Well, giving it
I'm s-
permission is the issue though. People so frequently just zip through the permission request screens, and Android has improved by adding a allow in background or allow in foreground function. So you can make sure that
Mhm.
an app is only location tracking when it's in the foreground.
Right.
But
The iPhone doesn't do that.
I think it might. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I
I
haven't
think it
used it.
does now as well.
Okay.
But it really brings up the issue of like, do all these apps need background location tracking? Is that something that is really pro consumer?
Hmm.
Should there be legislation on that kind of tracking? Because there are always going to be people who will try to use it maliciously, and then there will be people who just say okay, okay, okay to every dialogue that pops up on their phone.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, I know. I know. My mother's like that. That's it. That's a good example of one of the things my mother does. It's like, you gotta be careful.
well, for a long time with phones, you didn't have to be careful. That was one of the great things about the smartphone was you're not going to get a virus. It's locked down completely. Nothing, no apps get root access. But now it's sort of like we have so many permissions and so much functionality that I could program an app that acted like a virus and fit all of the rules of the App Store.
Hmm.
Uh, YouTuber The Real Pygon says iOS 13 cracks down on the background location.
It sounds like it has the same permissions Android has now, where you can tell it to only enable when the application's in use.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
are we okay as a society that the coffee company that you get your morning coffee from is tracking your location 24/7, or is that seems like some kind of ethical breach in how we allow corporations to operate? If you're a coffee
Yep.
company, you're a coffee company. Don't do this bullshit location tracking stuff constantly.
Hmm.
Um,
I love when it
I
shows up
agree.
on the morning news every once in a while, and then everyone's like freaking out, like they didn't know that their phone was tracking them. It's like we've known this for years now.
right.
It's
The nerds
not
have
Hey,
known.
anything.
did you know your phone has a hot mic on it too? Were you aware of that? Like it's always listening to you? No, don't. Just try to say the magic words and you'll know.
Yeah, I have
All
four
right.
hot mics in my current room.
Mm-hmm.
It's yeah, I something
And you're probably the more paranoid among the three of us, and that's what you have in your room.
right.
You don't want to know what I have. Just on this desk right here.
I absolutely don't want to know. You're right.
Oh
Well, and
man.
I think of this crap every time I see. I bought an air conditioner for this summer for my living room, and I couldn't get a dumb air conditioner. I could only get a Wi-Fi connected smart air conditioner. They didn't sell a dumb one. I,
I'm sure you could find them, but yeah, I
Possibly,
get it.
but I mean, at Home Depot they sure didn't carry one.
I mean, I don't think that's necessarily malicious. I think that the technology and the cost has reduced so much. It's like, okay, yeah, so it's the air conditioner you put in your window, but why not have an app that you can control the temperature through the app? Why make people? I mean, I think that's part of it, but I get what you're saying as well. It's you just don't know what underlying things they may be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I showed you guys a picture a couple of years ago. I went to Walmart and they were selling a smart crock pot. I mean, the whole point of a crock pot is that you turn it on and you can leave it alone for 10 hours. Like,
But I want to know where it's at when I'm at work. Is it
What
still
is the
on?
temperature? How hot is it? Is my stew done?
but I mean, yeah, the technology's gotten cheaper and it's cheaper to integrate into all of this stuff, but like as the technology keeps getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, who's to say that they don't have a GPS chip in your air conditioner, and so they know which house it's installed in, so they know to go and call you and say, "Hey, you haven't serviced your air conditioner. You want that for $30?" I mean,
Sure.
that's the end game of all of these companies.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and they market under better service, right?
Right.
They're not invading your privacy. They're giving you better service.
My TV has ads on it that I can't turn off. I mean,
That's a problem. I have an issue with that. What brand
yeah,
TV is it?
Samsung. It's a high-end Samsung.
Oh man.
They get paid enough money, and there's no competition in that market space that it's just everyone has ads on their TV now.
Roku puts ads up as well, and it's like, I did buy this device from you. I am giving you, but
Right.
I also don't. I also don't have a subscription to them. So, yeah, I don't know, man. That's weird. Yeah, it's if I buy a Roku box, I feel like you guys should have figured this in on the price of on the little Roku thing I bought from you.
They
So
did.
don't
They
feed me
did.
ads.
It's 30 extra bucks they're making off of you.
Hmm.
Amazon sells their Kindle devices with an ad and a no ad version.
Yeah, I've
And
seen that.
it's upward of a $30 value to them for allowing ads on your device.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can't get a smart TV that doesn't have ads on it now because it cuts 30 bucks off the price. And when people are comparison shopping TVs, the first thing they look at is price, not quality. So everyone's trying to shave every cent off of TV. I read an article about the margins on big screen TVs right now, and it's very, very low. It's in the
Oh,
tens of dollars.
it's been razor thin. That was the industry I was in for a while. And even back then, it was razor thin.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's not. I'm not saying we should regulate everything, but it sure seems like we need to start regulating a lot more shit.
Or like I've been saying, man, we just need we need to define some sort of oversight committee. Not our politicians, because they're not doing the job. They don't know. I don't know. It just seems like a natural evolution of technology. We need like a governing body around technology now.
Well,
Like,
right now, we have the oldest government in the history of the United States.
well, tomorrow it'll be the oldest government, but by more. What's your point?
Is that
Like every day is the oldest government in the history
no,
of
no,
the
no.
United States.
The people, the officials, the
I
president,
gotcha. Okay.
the president, the House, and the Senate are the oldest that they have ever been in history,
Gotcha.
on average.
Uh-huh.
And we're dealing with cutting edge technology that is being rolled out overnight to millions of people. If there's a chart on Reddit that showed how long it took to get 10 million users, and it was like airplanes took 15 years to have 10 million regular users, and Pokemon Go took 4 hours. Like,
shit, we've been streaming for 2 years. We have like 150.
yeah, think about how much we're setting that curve back.
Good God, we're doing a terrible job. Hey, Matt, we can't even get the UN to agree on numerous things. Yes, I agree. We touched on this last week. Yeah, about having some sort of global. And it can't be. I said government. It can't be government. It has to be some sort of humanitarian sort of organization that does it, because
But then who's
governments
going to
don't get
enforce
shit
it?
done.
Well, I mean,
Damn it, John! Stop making good points. Okay, if you're gonna make good points, just mute yourself, please.
that's what Stallman and the new project have been trying to do for a long time, is say, like, listen,
That's
as,
true.
as this moves forward, your privacy is getting destroyed, and you're just not noticing.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't think Stallman's a great example because he's a little bit extreme. He's the Bernie Sanders of open source.
He's the wizard
I
of
mean-
open source.
But yeah, that's
Well,
true. I mean,
so then I get this article that says 845 gigabytes of explicit photos, chats, and more are leaked from dating apps. And it turns out that this one security research group had a tool to just browse for open buckets on S3, and they found
God, don't tell me this.
Uh-huh.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh. And they
Okay.
found that this one company, this one sort of mega company that owned 8 sites or something like that, had just stored everything that was ever sent through their system on an open bucket.
Open bucket. Yep.
And
They didn't name the company?
they did.
Oh.
Some of them I don't want to say, but
Oh, it's right here, right? It's
Herpes Dating.
Right, Herpes Dating? There's a site called Herpes Dating?
Cougary. X-Pal.
Herpes Should Date. Gay Daddy Bear? Oh, man. These are some awesome names. G-Hunt.
So these are all apparently owned by Chengdu New Tech Zone.
Oh, so they're all owned by the same company.
Right.
Okay.
But this is the kind of thing where it's like, yeah, if you're not using Signal to send your communications, you don't know where they're going. And I had this article up earlier, and they had. Oh no, I'm sorry. If you click through where they published their findings on VPN Mentor, they show some edited photos that they had downloaded.
Yeah, 845 gigabytes. That is a lot of data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I never had to go on a dating app, so I can't understand. But I'm glad. I'm so glad I don't have to date in this world. I mean, I've never dated,
shit.
to be honest. I got married. I married the woman I dated in high school. We dated in high school. We dated for a few years after high school. We got married. So like I never had to date as like a real adult. And I'm so happy. I'm so happy I didn't have to go through that because man, it seems like such a pain in the ass.
How about some coding stuff?
Oh, please talk to me about coding. We got Matt talking about something in chat if you're interested. He says, so I used this one package and the guy who made it opted to do such a overhaul between 6 and 7 that all my code using it was garbage. So I forked it to make my own. Yeah, well, welcome to backwards breaking changes, Matt. This is,
unnecessary backwards break. Because if the 6 branch just supported 7.
Mr. Wilson,
you're right.
how you doing, buddy?
Shouldn't.
Oh, damn. See? My buddy Andy calls me out. I'm sitting here, I'm bad-mouthing dating apps, and that's where he found his wife, so now I'm the jerk again. Thank you. Thank you, three-bagger. Appreciate that.
I got no problem with that. I found a couple wives on dating apps.
Thomas, before you go into the topic you were going to talk, a few weeks ago we talked about using SQLite in your unit tests.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And we had yet another issue come up this past week where using SQLite broke unit tests. And this one was simply the fact that the interval option in a query.
The what option?
The interval.
So interval, so when you're trying to do date calculations, you can use interval to figure out, 60 seconds ago or whatever you want to use. SQL wouldn't offer that, so it was breaking unit tests. Just something else to think about when you're trying to decide how you're going to run your tests.
And we forgot to mention that when we talked about it the first time, there was actually an article that one of our developers posted in Slack that went along with that. I believe I added that to the show notes. So if you look back about a week or two ago, you should probably see in the show notes there was an article about using SQLite in test. But yeah,
I mean, I think I don't use Laravel enough, so I don't know about testing. But in my other code base that I do most of my work in, I try really, really hard not to do database tests. And with newer code, I'm very successful at that.
how do you work around not doing database tests?
You don't interact directly with the database.
You mock
you
it.
introduce mocks. If you're using a repository, the repository gives you back mock that repository to say, hey, give me back a user object, and here's what the user object is going to look like. Obviously, you can't test your queries at that point, but
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, that seems like you're missing a chunk of your testing by doing that. I understand the concept of mocking and when to use it, but it just seems like you're missing a chunk of testing by doing
well,
that.
you're
Like,
not supposed to be. You're not testing the database. You're testing that your code works.
all right.
Well,
I mean,
I had this
valid.
conversation on Tuesday with my friend
Okay.
who is in QA. And he was telling me that his new MacBook took 24 minutes to run his PyCharm tests. And he had 2,400 PyCharm tests.
Holy crap! How much code does he have?
It's not that much code. So
I mean, 2,400. That's a lot of tests.
I asked him about it, and he said, well, we use testing as our database seeder for our dev environment. So it literally goes in and, like, when you add a user, add a record, add a report, it does all of that functionality every which way it can be done, one at a time. But PyCharm runs it threaded, so it still only took 24 minutes. But yeah, for the people out there, for the people who are out there who do testing and listen to this, let me know if that's insane or not, because that feels insane.
That's insane.
Feels insane to me. Yeah.
For one, you're not supposed to rely on your test running in a certain order. So if you're using it to seed your database, you're breaking that already. You're expecting things to run very sequentially.
He has a point there.
Where does the rule that you're not supposed to expect it to be in a specific order come from?
At least within
it's just a testing rule.
Your tests are supposed to be isolated where you rely on a specific order. If you put your test in your file where test 1 has to run before test 2, there's a chance test 2 is going to break if you're relying on that. They should be perfectly isolated. And if you can do that, you could run your test in parallel, right? You could have multiple processes running. There are tools out there for PHP unit to run in parallel to help speed your test up.
Yeah, he has a valid point. Your tests aren't supposed. One test should not be dependent on another test, and it shouldn't be dependent on the order of test either.
And to that end, you're testing your code. You're not testing the database itself. So if you could get that piece out
I don't know if I buy 100%. I mean, I think in general, see, when you say it, it seems like a good idea, but then I start thinking, well, how many times have my tests caught something wrong with my database configuration?
Because you're so used to active record within Laravel Eloquent.
This is true. Yeah, I'll give you that.
And from my little bit I use with Laravel, it's just you're using facades, but they're still creating new objects for you. So you're not injecting data into your classes. You're basically calling new on an object.
Well, you can use facades without a database. Like, you can have facade create the object.
I'm not saying that it's that, but it's so littered with facades to access your database layer that you're not seeing that you're creating new objects, right? You're just saying, hey, go get me this data. So you can't inject in there. So I, as I'm saying this, I think this is where our disconnect with the repository pattern comes from.
Mm-hmm.
The repository pattern is supposed to be something you can inject into your code and then have that get your data for you, instead of saying user first, or using the eloquent way of getting data out of your database. That way, through the repository, you could inject in a mock to get the data you need without using the database, because there should be no reason to now, I shouldn't say there's no reason. I use it a lot for very complex queries or query builders. So advanced search, for example, I ran into that issue months ago where you can't have more than 64 in a join. All those tests are really hard to make sure you have right by just checking if the SQL matches a pattern. So hitting the actual database is helpful in that case.
So if you're mocking all your objects and you're not using a database, what's to catch an error? Like if you make a change to your database, what is there to catch that error? That, oh hey, no, there's this new column there that's not required, but hey, the user test passed because we're not actually hitting the database and doesn't know that new column was added.
That's a fair point, and I don't have a good answer with
Okay.
eloquent. I have an answer with doctrine. Doctrine makes it.
Okay.
It's assuming you have there's tools that verify that your annotations match up with the schema of the database.
The annotations match up with the schema. So the annotations are used in the test as well. So it doesn't actually
not as part of the test per se.
Oh,
there's a separate
okay.
tool that verifies that your entities, that the doc blocks that you have that says these are my fields and here's their names, matches the actual scheme of the database. So
yeah, I can see that.
So it's not part of your unit test per se. It's a separate piece of your CI that validates your doctrine entities first, and then your test can run.
But again, let's take the user creation example, right? Let's say you add a column, and you think you've touched all the places in your code, registration, update. You think you've touched all the places in your code where user creations happen that may need that extra column, but because you don't actually use that database, you don't actually use those migrations or the database in your test, unless you remember to go update your test never knows that, oh hell yeah, there's another column there that's a required column.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that.
Okay.
Your doctrine solves that to a point with that tool I'm talking about. You should have tests around your entity up to the point of actually saving, but not actually testing the save because you're not testing the database.
I think
I'm not
the
saying
solution
you can't.
The solution there is a DBA and proper use of repositories to abstract your database out of your system.
Yeah. I mean, I like what John's saying. I think I've become too, because I actually use the SQLite in memory for Laravel, and I use it as almost a test for my migrations to make sure I haven't screwed up a migration, and like I said, I catch screw ups all the time by doing that. So I mean, I see the benefit, but obviously we've discovered a lot of drawbacks recently of using SQLite, and I'm not a fan of using a real database either.
So I could see a benefit of testing just your model to a SQLite where you're not really relying on those the edge cases of interval and other things that aren't supported in both. That'll make sure that your model is correct with the database. Everything else should be pretty fluid as far as you're testing with mocks.
testing.
So we talked about the new client we have, and I really wanted to get unit tests, get objects created prior to creating any database schema, because that could help drive what the database schema would look like later. And that's kind of what I did with the criteria and other pieces, was get those objects defined, start to figure out how they interact. I didn't stay on top of it, so I'm know that a lot of database tests were introduced into that code base.
Oh, you didn't see the problem from today, did you? Or was it yesterday?
Yesterday.
Yeah, where the test ran and it overwrote the database.
Oh, yeah, I did see that.
I'm like, excuse me, what?
Well,
Like, oh,
it's
yeah,
because they ran the test in production because they couldn't figure out what was wrong with the difference between dev and production.
Oh
They
no.
ran the unit test in production. It's not. I mean, it's pre-production. It was the client wanted to demo the product today.
right.
So
It
yesterday
wasn't so terrible, but
That's why you use required dev in Composer, so that PHP unit doesn't get installed.
well, no, because this, to John's point, this environment isn't marked as production; it's marked as dev. So it's not a production. It was just a server.
it's like a
We
staging
wanted,
server, but meant for the client to be able to demo the product.
right. So the client had access to the product and could look at it. Well, what should have happened is a separate database should have been defined in the PHP unit XML is what should have happened, but that
Well,
didn't
and
happen.
PHP unit has like a no commit mode too, where everything is run into transaction and it's rolled back at the end of the test.
Base.
How does that's interesting. I
It
wonder
just
how that works with migrations, though.
because
It says
it tests it tests after the execution of the SQL. So the whole of PHP unit runs in a single transaction.
It then just rolls it back.
Yeah.
I'm so confused. You're saying that's a PHP unit thing?
Yeah.
It can't be.
Is it,
PHP unit doesn't connect to your database. Your application does. I put in database transaction, like begin transaction and roll back in my testing suite. So anytime I'm interacting with the database, my setup is a start transaction, and my teardown is a rollback.
Okay, so it's a Laravel PHP unit feature.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of feedback in chat about this. Jesse, I assume you're on a delay, so by now you know it wasn't actually a production database. Shutter says DB needs functional tests, but very few. Query has two cases, for example, data found or not found. That's true. We never, yeah, I never actually test what. Oh, I see what you're saying. So like you'd query data and you say, does this user have an email address? Is that in the data? Yeah, I see what you're saying. That does make sense. Yeah. The refresh, no, the refresh database treats Laravel for rollback. No, I don't think that's correct. I think it does it's basically a DB fresh for each test. I don't think it does a rollback. Perhaps it does, but I'm pretty sure it just does a rollback. Or it just does a fresh for it. So.
Yeah, the one that we're talking about is database transactions. It's an argument in PHP unit Laravel.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But still, there shouldn't be an over reliance on it. That's where repositories come in. You can mock it. You should, and get back the data you're expecting. You can inject it into your classes more easily.
Yeah, I do think I've been too dependent on including my database as part of the test. Like again, like I said, I was actually very dependent on the migrations, like having it kind of go through my migrations, make sure my migrations were correct. So
I guess I haven't seen your code lately. I know you're big on repositories, but do you still hit Eloquent directly within, say, your controllers, or do you do
I try
everything
and
through the repositories?
yeah, I try to do things through repositories.
So you're injecting
Yeah,
that into say your controller, for
into
example.
into the controller. Yeah,
Then
yeah.
testing should be super simple at that point.
I've been trying to do it. I've been trying to do a new pattern where uh, maybe this isn't a good idea, but I've been trying not to be overly dependent on the repository pattern because I know I have a tendency to go to that too frequently, and especially if it's not actually needed, or if it's not actually implemented correctly. But so I try to say, okay, if I do the rule of what's the rule of three? I call it the rule of three. Is if I make a call to a particular database, to a particular model with a particular query more than twice, I move it to a repository.
So that's a refactoring pattern of rule of three.
Yeah,
But when it
yeah.
comes to testing, if you are hitting your models directly, that inherently hits the database, which because you can't if you're doing it through um,
So
facades,
repository is better for testing.
yeah, because
Yes.
you're going to mock the repository.
Fantastic.
You pass that in, and then you say, hey, when I ask the repository for or this method, it's going to return this object or this
Gotcha.
collection of objects. So you can mock
Okay.
those a lot easier and then
Well,
use the mocks, and you never hit the database. You just
yay, repository patterns. I love
so
repository
so
patterns.
you test the repository separately, and then within your controller or your other code that uses the repository, you assume the repository is well tested, so you know you're going to get back valid data or
Mm.
exceptions, and then you should handle valid data and the exceptions in that case, but not the database at that point.
And one of these days, one of us will actually do this.
Uh,
All right.
I don't use Laravel, so I get to do it all the time because I'm not reliant on
Oh, right.
Eloquent and
Because you're not cool.
You
You're
don't
not
have your
cool.
sumo
That's why.
controllers.
Gotta look at my code, man. My code is. And hey, I don't know if I told you guys, but Blade components are awesome.
Yeah,
I'm
for like
using
a
them
half
more and
hour
more
last
now.
week.
Oh, every week, man. Blade components. Every week, I'm loving them. You gotta look at my repos. They're looking so pretty. All right, this is it. We've been running. We've been gabbing. I didn't think we had a whole lot to talk about tonight, but turned out we had a pretty good conversation going on. We got a few things queued up for next week, I think. But I think this is good. 195, gentlemen. Our march continues to 200, and at which point I have a strong suspicion the world will end. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
I
But that's
believe
it.
I believe I have a special treat for our 200th episode.
Ooh, I do like the tease. Is it something you're going to share, or is it a surprise?
Surprise.
Oh, I like it. All right, well, then 5 shows away, and we'll see what it is. Okay, that's it. 195 in the can. I'm Eric.
I'm John.
I'm Tom.
Keep it ugly.
Keep it
Keep it
ugly.
ugly.
Ooh. Hey, man. My system ran so much better with this OBS. I tell you, it's not even funny. John, you are just having all sorts of issues, though, man.
I
I
still
felt
can't
bad
get
for you.
I still can't get your screen share center. I've had to look at your mug the entire time. The
Well,
entire
your background noise is finally going down. Like
yeah.
the
I
moment
figure
we
I'll wait till
finish
the
the
end of the
show.
show. Audio.
Oh man.
Oh, it's still doing it. It's constantly switching, and
Peace out, Andy.
it's got to be this USB hub. I think my mic.
Is it
It's
powered?
yeah, it's powered, but it
That's
connects to
weird.
the USB hub, which connects to the external GPU, which then connects to my laptop.
That's exactly what I have set up. As a matter of fact, it's funny because I kept thinking about plugging my mic directly into the external GPU, and I just haven't done it.
I was about to climb down and do that while we were recording, but I'm sure the audio's all screwed up everywhere, so it'll be fun.
Yeah. Get it. We'll knock it out. Dude, I'm trying to write this community corner article with the PHP 8 release managers, and we had recorded it, so I ran it through a transcription service to
Be right back.
put it on text. All right, put it on text, thinking, oh, this will be easy. I'll just copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. It's taken me like 3 times as long to work through the damn conversation.
Really?
Yeah.
Andrew, you can hang out with us for a little bit longer. I don't know how much longer we'll stay on, but
Yeah. Andy's my buddy. Yeah, let me stop sharing my screen so maybe things get back to normal for you.
no, I don't think it was that. I don't know what it was. I still can't like. Normally, you can drag around like who's being displayed, and
How do you guys do that? Because I can't do that. I know Thomas talked about it. Like you can drag people around. I don't have that ability. I just see the two of you, and then I'm small up in the corner. I can drag myself around.
yeah,
You can't drag John into the small corner.
Oh, I can drag John. I mean, I can't put him anywhere. I just
put him next to your small picture in the corner.
No, it doesn't. It just snaps back every time I try.
So I can drag all 3 cameras around.
yeah. I can't get. You are not taking over active position when you're talking. I'll have Eric's big mugshot right there.
So I just have both of you. Yeah. So John, I'm in the top right corner.
My audio keeps changing, driving me nuts.
Drives us
In the
nuts
top,
too.
in the top right corner, do you see my little face?
Yes, and if I
And
drag you down, it doesn't do anything. I see it switch to a plus.
Drag me into like the middle of the screen.
I know how to use Skype. It doesn't work. It's not
Weird.
working.
Here.
I've been trying it this whole time.
Let's see if I
Say,
drag.
can you see my screen, Thomas?
Yeah.
So look, this is what happens. I drag him. This is all I can do. I can drag him around, but he just snaps back the moment I let go.
I can mute you.
I don't know if you guys have the most recent Skype or what.
I don't know.
Eric, are you muted?
I don't know. Am I muted?
Yeah, he's muted.
I am.
So I can mute you. I don't know. That's the problem.
I don't like that. I mute you. I mute you. You no talk. Charles just mute everybody.
So
All right.
something, and it's stupid, and my audio devices are still constantly switching around. It's driving me nuts.
Yep.
I brought that up with Eric recently, trying Zoom with
so the problem
OBS.
The problem with Zoom, Kishu, is that with Skype, in OBS, each person in Skype is their own NDI input. So John, Thomas, and myself, we all have our own NDI input. The way they're doing it in Zoom is it's another application that you pick a area of your screen that's going to be the NDI input. So I don't have the granular control I have with Skype. I can't move. Like when I change scenes, I'm still broadcasting, right? When I change to certain scenes and we move the images around, or I give Thomas his own scene, I wouldn't have that functionality with Zoom. Now Zoom is supposed to be doing something with NDI, but it's not there yet.
Right.
But yeah, that's why we don't use it. I just have more control with Skype. So good question though. Good question.
Wait, Thomas, talk.
Nope, not hearing you, Thomas.
Unmute yourself and then talk.
You're still muted, buddy.
That's.
Someone keeps muting me.
Was not me. All right, I switched to active speaker or speaker view, and I still am not seeing. I still only have you.
Did you see what I posted in Discord?
Why don't you post in Discord? Walmart gave out these shirts to employees today. People, they really. What does it say?
Scientists, doctors, and nurses,
Oh, scientists.
And Walmart employees
and Walmart.
raising the flag at Iwo Jima.
I missed the fact that was the Walmart employee like smock that they wear.
Yeah. That's what they got for working through the pandemic.
Awesome.
That's funny.
Yeah, I honestly feel like the word of the year is going to be tone deaf.
Stop local, by the way, if you haven't already.
Oh yeah. I just like seeing people and corporations and just everyone just being so tone deaf.
I didn't really get into it too much, but around that whole master conversation we had, there's so many other words I wish would get banned more and get at least shunned upon,
like Trump
being used. Like what?
Yeah.
Like Trump?
Now, the one that bothers me, and I'm a big rap fan, but bitch, I hate the way bitch is used, and the way the word, how that word's just thrown around, and everybody's just okay with it. It's like, this guy's calling people, calling females bitches in his songs, and everybody's fine with this. We're all okay with this. I really have an issue with that word, and
Well, there's lots of words like that. I
exactly.
mean,
Yeah.
Well, I don't see why PHP still needs to have a native cunt library.
Excuse me? What? What are you saying?
He's saying that, yeah, that word you shouldn't be using bitch, but it's not part of, like, as far as technology, it's not the bitch branch.
I will correct you. I will correct you.
It's a systemic thing.
BitchX is a very common platform for media player.
Yeah, that's
really. No, I get what you're saying though, John. It's not part of a larger systemic issue. Although
I mean it's a systemic issue within like you're saying the rap culture, especially amongst men using it, especially derogatorily. That's calling people pussies.
Well, but see, I don't think it is as derogatory as it used to be, because I know a lot of young women who are very self-affirmingly bitches.
Well, and they use it in songs about themselves. I'm a bad bitch, and savage, and it's just. I don't know. You're right, John. I do see it as a systemic issue, and we've all kind of, so we're okay with this, but I don't know. I got an issue with that one.
John, did you see the pop-up in Rocket League?
What?
Did you see the pop-up in Rocket League last week?
Yeah, I did.
Which was like, they basically were like, "Oh, we didn't moderate our chat, and we're kind of sorry about that."
No, they moderated it, but they're being more aggressive with it now. If people use racist words constantly within the game,
yeah, like it's real bad.
And you can report people, and they may have been banned for a tiny bit of time, if at all. Now they're saying, no, we're taking an active stance, and we're going to ban you quickly, for a period of time, and if you get reported again, they're going to keep increasing the time.
Yeah, I get your issue. It's definitely challenging with kids and trying.
That's why I recommend not doing it.
Filter.
Do not raise children. No, don't raise children.
Don't worry, Sean. I thought you were saying don't filter the language. So that's always as funny as it is. That's kind of been one of our philosophies. Is we don't. My wife and I aren't foul speakers. As a matter of fact, my wife probably speaks more more curse words than I do. But
Yeah, I've met her. She's like my wife.
but we were never going to. We didn't want to try to filter the kids as far as like language and stuff goes, because I don't know. I feel like our thinking at the time was, the sooner they learn how to handle and manage that sort of language, the better. Now, I've always tried to.
Wait. Congratulations, Thomas. You're dad again.
Nope. I'm sending one out to California.
But I've always tried to embed in my kids that cussing is just a weak mind who that can't formulate a good thought. So because and I cuss. I mean, I do it on the show sometimes. What?
It's the lowest form of communication.
Yeah. So, but it didn't work out. My kids, I catch them all the time, and the good thing is they don't try to hide it from me because we've always had this kind of open dialogue. At the same time, I do make sure they realize the words that are coming out of their mouth.
Yeah, I'm nonplussed.
All right. Well, I'm turning in. I got to move an office tomorrow. I'm not looking forward to it. So.
John, you want to do a couple rounds of Rocket League?
Game. What do you need help tomorrow, or are you good?
No, I'm good. I'm gonna recruit the kids and try to get basically try to get everything out of there, and I don't know, see what we have left. You're gonna still need to pop in there and do the electrical stuff.
That's fine.
I'm not changing that. I'm not doing that.
It's really just the AC at this point, right?
And we need to put the lock back on the door.
Yeah, the handle.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to kill the stream. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Appreciate you hanging out with us.
Yep.
Good conversation tonight.
All right. Good night.
Thanks to our Patreons that we forgot to
Oh, yeah. Thanks
thank
to the
again.
Patreons,
Damn
of
it.
course.